All right, so MARC Amateur Radio Club, we're going to talk about EchoLink and the MARC Repeater. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it so we can get through some of the stuff. We actually have a ton of slides tonight, and normally I try to spend a few minutes on each slide. I'm probably going to go a lot faster tonight just because we're pressed for time and we have a lot more slides than we usually do. So we're going to dive into it. I'm going to talk about EchoLink and repeater linking and things like that. And then Jeff is going to talk about our implementation for MARC. So let's dive right in. So this is the MARC repeater, and you can see the repeater location. It's down by the by the animal rescue building on what's that, Cottonwood Street, I think they call it. We used to call it the road that goes nowhere because it didn't go anywhere, but then they put a bridge on it and now it goes to the hospital. So but it's down there by the animal rescue. There is actually a 200-foot tower on that site, and we approached Murray City about putting a repeater there, and they were very agreeable to that. In fact, they funded the installation of the antenna, so we didn't have to climb the tower, which was nice. So there's a picture here of our repeater. You can see the 4 cavities that are associated with it and the rack-mounted equipment. The tower is there. The repeater antenna is about 180 feet up that tower. So the repeater was installed April 22nd in 2021. It operates on the 1.25 meter band, or the 220 band, as people often call it, even though we don't actually have access to 220. It starts at 222, but we used to have access to 220, and now because of the FCC and their desire to sell frequency space, we do not have access to those 2 megahertz there. But our repeater is at 223.96 megahertz. If you want to get on it, there is a PL tone or a CTCSS tone of 103.5 hertz. The repeater has about 40 watts of power out of the transmitter, but the antenna gives us several decibels of gain, and the antenna is actually located 180 feet above the ground. And so the ERP of this repeater is about 320 watts. You can see in this image here a coverage of the repeater area, and this is actually, it actually does better than this. So I know there a couple of weeks ago, Dan was out around Tooele on I-80 and was able to hit the repeater, and that's through the mountain. So there's some weird properties with the 1.25 meter band, one of which is it really likes to skip over the top of mountains. And there's this kind of knife edge propagation thing that happens. And most of the signal gets wasted into space, but some of it makes it over the top of that and can get back down and hit the repeater. So we actually have amazingly good coverage with this repeater. If you want to produce a coverage map like this, there's a link to the site that I use to do it. It's called Radio Mobile Online, and it's actually pretty easy to work with. So if you have a repeater that you want to make a coverage map for, it takes into account things like the terrain and stuff like that, and tries to identify, you tell it like how many watts you've got, how high the antenna is, and that kind of stuff, and it figures out what the coverage should be based on that. So let's go on to the next slide. So here's a plot of MARC members, where the members of the MARC Amateur Radio Club actually live. And you will see, yeah, most of them are clustered in the Salt Lake Valley, but there are some outliers. We've got one person as far north as Hooper and as far south as Payson. And Paul out in West Valley is way out there, like almost to Magna. So, you know, it's pretty geographically separated. And you can see somebody down there in Harriman as well. I think that is Henry. Maybe it's in Riverton. Maybe it's you. No. All right. But so we have people that are not local to the repeater, right? And sometimes people travel, right? I mean, Dan goes to Minnesota quite often. I go to Las Vegas all the time. Not to gamble. My son lives in Las Vegas. My grandkids are in Las Vegas, so we go down to see them. But it would be nice to allow club members to be able to get to us on our repeater, no matter where they are physically. For those of you who are familiar with the BBC show Red Dwarf, the comment here is from Dave Lister, where he says, But how'd you do that, Hall? And there's a simple solution. We'll get to that. All right, so let's talk about linked repeater systems. Here in Utah, we have access to a lot of linked repeater systems. There are three big ones that I know of: the Intermountain Intertie, the Sinbad Network, and the Cactus Intertie. Cactus is actually a closed system. You have to be a Cactus member to use it, but the other two are open systems and anybody can use those. Intermountain Intertie basically covers pretty much from West Yellowstone, Montana down to Las Vegas, which is pretty freaking awesome. It covers west out into Nevada, and sometimes people bring up links into California. And it covers east into Wyoming, and there's some access into Colorado now, and there's more interest in doing more connections into Colorado. And there's also some connectivity into Arizona as well. So Intertie is an amazing system, and it's completely RF. There's no internet links or anything like that involved. It's all radios. So it's kind of cool. Sinbad covers mostly the southeastern part of the state, kind of the Price area down in that area. It does have a node on Lake Mountain, which is in Utah Valley, and you can hit that from here pretty effectively. So you can get onto the Sinbad network. Cactus Intertie, I'm not going to talk a lot about because I'm not a member and I don't really know a lot about it. I just know that it exists. SAMI KA7 EGC is trying to build out a network of 1.25 meter repeaters. He calls this the High Desert Amateur Radio Club. There's a link to his website there. And we have been talking about getting the MARC repeater onto that network. That'll be a network of repeaters that are on that band scattered across the state. So it's not in place yet, but it's in the works. There's other small networks of linked repeaters around. For example, there's a network where you might have 2 or 3 repeaters linked together. Quite often it'll be a 2-meter repeater and a 70-centimeter repeater, or a 70-centimeter repeater and a 6-meter repeater, so that you can communicate on both bands. Those are around. If you want to find out about those, pull up the repeater list from the Utah VHF Society and look at the links column, and you'll see it'll have either like a frequency there saying it's also linked to this other repeater, or it might have the name of another network or something like that. So you can take a look at those. Repeaters can also be linked using the internet. And there are a lot of different systems out there that support this. The big ones are IRLP, which is the Internet Radio Linking Protocol, All-Star, and EchoLink. And a lot of digital repeaters are also linked. For example, DMR repeaters or D-Star repeaters, Yaesu System Fusion and WiresX, things like that. Those are often linked over the internet. And in fact, I know DMR and D-Star are linked into wide area networks that span the entire globe. So it's very easy if you have a DMR radio, you can hop on a local DMR repeater and make contacts with talk groups in other countries very simply and easily. It takes advantage of the capabilities of the internet. Recently, a couple weeks ago, we had the Utah Digital Communications Conference, and they had a presentation on a system that links multiple digital systems together. So it basically bridges DMR, D-Star, Yaesu System Fusion, PS25, what was the other one? Nexton, something like that. And then there was one other one. I can't remember what the other one was, but pretty slick. It actually connects them all together. So you could have a talk group, a single talk group that spans multiple digital systems, and be able to communicate back and forth, whether you have a D-Star radio or a DMR radio or a Yaesu radio, you could communicate through that mechanism. Pretty slick. All right, so I think I just kind of covered all of that. Yeah, one of the things here, IRLP actually requires a radio on both ends of the internet link. So there must be RF involved at both ends of the communication for IRLP. So that's one of their requirements. They don't allow like direct computer access into the digital stream. All-Star There's a system where it uses essentially a PBX. There's an application that runs and attaches to an asterisk PBX system, and it ties in multiple of these communications protocols. And in fact, you can actually hook EchoLink into that as well. So it's probably overkill for what we want to do as MARC, but it's something to think about. And then there's EchoLink, which supports linking repeaters. It supports computer access without using a radio. It supports point to multi-point. It's pretty easy to set up relatively, right, Jeff? And there are controls in place to restrict its usage to amateur radio operators. So they actually validate your license. We're going to talk about that in a bit. All right. So let's talk about EchoLink. EchoLink is about linking hams, not necessarily radios, over the internet. It was originally developed by Jonathan Taylor, K1RFD, in about 2002. The application runs on Windows. There are compatible versions for Android and iOS for your mobile devices and for Mac and Linux. You could also run the Windows application on Mac or Linux using Wine, and I have successfully done that. I don't like to depend on that because you never know when something's going to break and you update some software and all of a sudden your connection that you're depending on is broken. So I don't like depending on that kind of that emulation layer, but it is possible to do. EchoLink does require validation of your amateur radio license, and you can run it in what they call user mode, or and here I always call this SciSop because I came from the BBS days back in the 80s, and you know, and we called the person who ran the machine a SciSop, but some people call it a SysOp. And I don't know, Jeff, do you know if there's a recommended pronunciation of that for EchoLink? Oh, really? Oh, well, okay. Um, anyway, so you can run in user mode, or we'll call it, I'll try to call it SysOp if I can. If I slip and say SysOp, understand that's what I'm talking about. But basically, user mode is for individual operators who are connected directly to the internet, no radio required. And SysOp mode is where the computer system and the node connects to a repeater or a simplex link and allows RF communications. And it also ties into the internet side. So it provides this kind of bridge between the RF side and the internet side. In user mode, you don't need any RF, right? You're strictly on the internet. In SysOp mode, you are using the radio as well. All right. So for hardware, in user mode, all you need is a PC with a sound card, a mic and speakers, or a headset, and a connection to the internet. In SysOp mode, you need some kind of an interface to allow your PC to connect to a radio. So it has to have some way to listen to the radio. It has to have some way to key up the transmitter on the radio, and it has to have some way to put audio into the radio. Typically, that is some kind of a hardware device that connects the sound card on your computer to the mic and speaker jacks on your radio, mic and headphone jack typically. There are custom hardware devices that do this. There are several commercial solutions, the Rig Blaster, DigiRig, SignalLink out there, or you could build your own solution if you wanted. We're going to walk through setting up an EchoLink account, but key factor, EchoLink requires validation of your amateur radio license. They want to make sure you are actually an amateur radio operator. And it's not validating your call sign, it's validating that you are the person who is licensed, okay? So what you need to do that is a PDF copy of your official license document. And you see my copy here says official copy on it. If I go to the FCC site, I can pull down pretty much anybody's license, but it's going to say reference copy on it. They want to see an official copy, which indicates that I was able to successfully log into the FCC site and download my own license, okay? That is going to be critical here. So we're going to talk about how that all works and what we have to do here. So how do I get my official copy of my license? Now, when I first got licensed, the FCC would mail you a piece of paper that was your license, right? They don't do that anymore. Nowadays, they put your name and your call sign in the system, and you have to go online and download it. So one thing to note, what we're going to talk about here is only for US amateurs. Other countries have their own ways of managing this kind of stuff. And EchoLink recognizes users from other countries, and so they take advantage of the other countries' mechanisms for validating their people. So we're only going to talk about the US here. I'm not going to talk about how they do it in other countries. So the first thing you need to get your official copy of your license is your FRN. That is your FCC registration number. How many people know what their FRN is or know where to find it if they needed it? Okay. So your FRN, you had to get that when you first got your license, or if you got your license a long time ago, maybe you didn't have to get that and you need to get one now. And in that case, you'll need to get one and associate it with your license. The FCC has a mechanism for that. But if you've got one and you don't know what it is, you can go to the FCC ULS site and you'll be able to get it. So one thing to note, I have the URL here. The FCC recommends that you do this from a computer, not from a phone or tablet. As they say, the site is not optimized for smaller screens. So one thing to keep in mind, the FCC is a government operation, right? So all of their stuff was built by the lowest cost contractor that they could find. So the FCC website is no exception to that. And it is pretty darn terrible when you come right down to it. However, it's what we have and what we have to work with. So let's figure out what we have to do this. First thing you got to do is log into the license manager. So when you go to that URL, you're going to get a page that says log in here. And it'll say basically what we have here. You're going to put in your FCC registration number in this little box, and you're going to put in your password. Now, if you don't know what your FRN is, or you don't even know if you have one, then you see that link there where it says check your licenses, where the bottom arrow is pointing. That's the link we're going to look at next. So if you go there, you'll find a place to search for your license. It'll be this URL right here. You can put in your call sign and click search. And you may want to turn on exact matches only, but in my experience, it's just as slow if you do or if you don't. So it's pretty slow. But you'll get back a page that looks something like this. It'll have your call sign over here on the left. It'll have your name, and it'll have your FRN number right there. You can actually look up anybody's FRN number. There's no restrictions on that. This is all public information, okay? So you can get your FRN number if you didn't have it. Now, once you have your FRN number, then you want to download your official authorization. So the first thing you're going to do is log into the FCC site. Remember that page that we were looking at a second ago that looks like this. You're going to put your FRN in and your password, and you're going to get a page that looks like this. It says, these are your licenses. And you'll see I have here a ham radio license. The radio service is HA for ham. Anybody know what ZA is? GMRS, GMRS. General Mobile Radio Service, GMRS. So this license is actually expired, but it still shows up on this list because it was issued to me. So you're going to see this. You're going to click up here where it says, don't worry about the fact that your license is down here. You see this thing where it says up at the top, download your official electronic authorizations here. So if you click where it says here, then you will see something that looks sort of like this. This is really terrible. This is a horrific interface, but this is what it is, right? You'll see on the left side, this box that has a list of all of your active licenses. And you see it only shows my ham license. It doesn't show my GMRS license because that one's expired. The right box will be empty at this point. So you click on the license that you care about on the left, and then you have to click where it says add, and then it will populate in this right-hand box, right? Some people, I guess, have hundreds of licenses, so they want to be able to select only the ones that they care about to print out, right? But I only have the one. So you'll click add, and it'll show up in this right-hand side over here. And then down at the bottom of the screen, way over on the far right side, and trust me, when I first looked at this, I had a pretty wide window, and all of this stuff was on like the left third of the screen, and the download button was way over on the right at the bottom. So I shrunk it down to fit on this slide better. But yeah, so you're going to click where it says download here, and you may see something that looks like this, where it says, in my case, Firefox prevented this site from opening a pop-up window. I use Firefox normally for my web browsing, and so I got this message, and I clicked on options, and I said, go ahead and show that page. And so you can see it says one of the options here is to show that. Other browsers may show that a little differently. I think Chrome shows it in the URL bar where the URL actually is. There'll be a little button there to click to allow the pop-up. Why it comes up as a pop-up, I don't know. This is, again, FCC website design 101. So it's pretty terrible. But in any case, do whatever you have to do to get that pop-up to show up. And that pop-up will have the PDF of your license in it. Okay. And you will see that. You'll see your license with official copy on it as a PDF page. Save that to your computer. It'll probably default to naming it after your FRN. So it'll be your frn.pdf. Okay. Save it in your downloads folder or wherever your saving is configured to go. I recommend you hang on to a copy of that file in case you ever need it in the future, just because it's such a pain to get it. So save it somewhere, put it on a thumb drive or back it up somehow, or put it on your, if you have Dropbox or something like that, put it there somewhere where you can get at it later. You may need it for other things in the future, and you may need it for more than just EchoLink. Okay, so once you have that, then you're going to go to EchoLink's website. It's echolink.org, and you're going to download the EchoLink software. So if you go to echolink.org, you're going to see this panel on the left side that has a bunch of links in it. You're going to click on download. It's going to download a program called EchoLink Setup. You're going to run that. If you're using a different operating system other than Windows, you probably are going to be looking for a different program. I'm not going to talk about how to actually get these, but I will tell you what they are. Qtel, if you're using a Debian machine, you can use apt to install Qtel. On a Mac, you can use brew to install EchoHam. On Android, it's in the Android App Store, and on iOS, it's in the Apple Store, whatever they call their application place. And it is just called the EchoLink app in those places. So you can get it for any of these other operating systems. But you click on that download, you're going to get the EchoLink setup. Go ahead and run that. And as you're running it, it'll bring up the setup wizard. And you're just going to basically step through this wizard. And eventually, EchoLink is going to get installed. Once EchoLink is installed, go ahead and run the EchoLink software. It'll just be called EchoLink. Well, the first time you start that up, it's going to pop up this setup wizard, which is pretty nice. It's going to walk you through all the things that you want to do. As you go through this, you're going to see it's going to ask you, do you want to be a computer user or a SysOp? SysOp, yeah, that's it. It's going to ask you if you want to be a computer user or a SysOp. Yeah, SysOp. You're going to pick computer user. If you want to be a SysOp later, you're still going to want to do computer user first, just because it's easier to get started using it that way. When you're prompted, enter your call sign, make up a password. It has some restrictions on the password you can use. And I don't know, we actually did a security class for MARC, gosh, a couple of 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. It's been a while. Where we talked about things like passwords. And I don't remember what the requirements and limitations are for EchoLink's passwords, but they probably, a good way to make a password is to either come up with a phrase that you can remember and then pick like the first letter of each word or the second letter of each word and use that to make up your password, or pick a couple of easy to remember words that are not related and put some numbers and punctuation around them in various places. When I do passwords, I like passwords that have like 5 words with numbers and punctuation and capital letters and things like that. I don't remember what the requirements are. Some places will say, give us your password, and you'll put in a nice, beautiful password, and then it will say, that password's too long. I can't use that. And then you'll shake your head and you'll change it to something shorter. And remember, the shorter it gets, the less secure it gets, right? So it's passwords are terrible. We need to do away with them. We need to come up with a better mechanism for authenticating, but they're what we have right now. So you're going to put in your call sign, you're going to make up a password, put that in, don't forget it, you'll need it later. Put in your first name and your location. You can either say, like, I put in Murray, Utah, USA. You could put your grid square, you could put something else, whatever you want, really go in there. It doesn't have to be your actual location. And it'll ask for what your email address is. Make sure you use an email address that actually works, because they will be validating that. So you do that, and then you want to select the region where you're going to be running EchoLink. It will look at your call sign and guess what it thinks is best based on your call sign, and it's usually pretty good. But if you happen to be, so like Paul, for example, W4, Paul is W4, yeah, AE4KR, that's it. So he has a 4, which is, I think, Southeast US, right? And so it would say, oh, you're probably in the Southeast US. He's not, he's here. So it would probably default to North America South, and he would want to change it to North America West. The reason for this is so that it picks the EchoLink server that you're going to connect to. Now, even if you get the wrong one, everything is still going to work just fine. It's just a little bit more efficient if you're using one that's close to you. The next screen will give you a chance to run the firewall test. So let's talk a little bit about firewalls and EchoLink. So EchoLink has 2 types of functionality. You can make outbound connections from your computer, or you can receive inbound connections to your computer. In order for this to work, the EchoLink app has to be able to get out of your network, and inbound connections have to be able to get in to wherever your computer is, right? So EchoLink uses a couple of different ports, 5198 and 5199 on UDP. Now, if you don't know what UDP and TCP are, they're just different protocols for how data is put into packets and sent out onto the internet. That's all you have to know about it. It's going to use UDP ports 5198, 5199, and TCP port 5200. Now, if you're running this on your home network, you probably have a firewall in conjunction with your home router. Your router probably also does some other things for you, like NAT translation, which is it allows you to have multiple devices on your home network, even though you're only paying for one IP address from your internet service provider. So when you sign into EchoLink, EchoLink registers you with the servers using your public IP address. That's the IP address on the outside of your router, okay? Each public IP address can only support one EchoLink node. And this is important. If you want to run EchoLink on more than one device inside your network, that's not going to work by default, because they're all going to be trying to use the same public IP address. There are ways to get around that. We're going to talk about those in a minute, but that is something to consider. If you've got more than one computer that you want to run EchoLink on, that may not work the way you want it to work. Also, the other thing that you need to think about is these inbound connections. So let's go back and talk about that a little bit more. Where is it? So remember I told you about these two ports, 5198, 5199. In order for someone to connect to you, you have to set up port forwarding in your router so that connections to those ports can get to your computer where you're running EchoLink. You don't have to worry about that typically if you're just making connections out and you're not expecting to receive an inbound connection. So I'm not going to go into that anymore right now, but just keep that in mind. There is interaction with the firewall, and you may have to tweak your router settings accordingly. All right, so after you finish the setup wizard, now you're going to need to do this validation of your license. So you go back to the EchoLink website, and there's a button on that left column that says validation. Click on that, it'll take you to this link. You can put in your call sign there. There'll be a spot to put in your call sign, and it'll send you to a page where you can enter your email address and request validation. So you're going to do that. They'll send you an email. Go look in your email. You'll find a link in there. It may be in your spam folder. So if you haven't got it in a minute or two, look in your spam folder, double check things, make sure you can find it. Click the link in the email, and then it'll ask you to upload a copy of your license. This has to be the official copy that you downloaded from the FCC. And again, if you're outside the US, there are other procedures depending on what your country does and how it handles your licenses and things like that. But I'm only talking about the US here. You cannot be validated if your license is expired. You can't be validated unless your license is an official copy. So once you've uploaded your license, now you have to wait. Someone who is a volunteer for the EchoLink organization has access to this queue of validation requests. They said they handle 15 requests a day on average, if I remember right. So it may take a little while for someone to notice that you have requested a validation and actually go look at your license and compare it with your call sign and make sure that you're actually who you say you are. At some point, you will get notified via an email that you have been validated. It can happen pretty quick. If somebody happens to be looking at that right now and they see it and they do it, it can also take a day or two if nobody happens to look at it right then. So don't panic. But at the same time, when I say that, if you want to use EchoLink on Sunday, you might want to do this tonight, right? Do this validation part tonight because it may take a day or two to get actually validated. All right. So once you're validated, then you can get back into the EchoLink software. You can sign into EchoLink, and we're going to talk about some of the more advanced configuration settings that are on there. So if you go to the Tools Setup menu, you will see something that looks like this. This is the Servers tab, and you'll see it lists 4 different servers here, and it shows NA West, NA South, servers, and backup. Excuse me. These are the ones that it defaulted to based on the information I told it that I was in North America West. And so it picked these ones to use. Again, any of them will work. Okay. It's not something that you have to worry a lot about. EchoLink will automatically, if NA West happens to be down when you try to connect in, it'll try the next one. This is the list of 4 that it's going to try. And that servers.echolink.org will actually return, I think, 3 different IP addresses. So the software can actually try multiple servers. I think there's like 7 of them out there across the world. So don't worry too much about that. If you go back to your router configuration, if you can't modify your router or firewall configuration, or you can't figure out how to do it, there is this proxy tab on this system setup page menu. Direct connection is the default. That's where you're connecting directly out and people are connecting directly into you. The next best option is this automatic proxy selection. So what a proxy is it's a server running on a public IP address somewhere on the internet that you can connect to and that other people can also connect to. And so if you set that up, it will automatically handle inbound connections for you. So you don't have to modify your router configuration. It's okay to use these proxies, okay? You can pick a specific public proxy. You can set up a private proxy if you have access to a machine where you can run it, or you can depend on the automatic proxy selection. There's nothing wrong with using a proxy, okay? You can't use a proxy if you're in sysop mode. Got it right. About that. Okay. Other advanced setup, you probably won't have to change anything in the timing or the performance menus. Those should be okay. But you may want to look at the audio menu. If EchoLink doesn't find your speakers and your mic or your headphones correctly, you may need to tweak the audio menu a little bit. Some headsets may have multiple options, right? My headset that I use has a setting for music, which is nice high fidelity sound, and I can hear really well with it. It also has a setting for what they call hands-free mode when I'm connected to my phone, and my audio sounds like crap, but voices sound pretty good. And that's the one that you want to use if you're using a headset that has multiple profiles. Yeah, there's also an option here where you can tweak some other settings in your sound card. And then you can ask it to actually automatically record every QSO you make, or only QSOs you make with a specific call sign or list of call signs. So you can tweak those as you need to. The other menu that you want to look at is under Tools Preferences. Tools Preferences is different from Tools Setup, okay? Most likely the only thing you want to look at here is the PTT control. So if you look at this tab, there is this connections menu, connections tab on this menu, and you'll see down there where it says PTT control. If you click that, it'll pop up this extra dialog here where you can adjust the push to talk settings. The default is to not have momentary set. And what that means is when you want to transmit, you'll push and release the spacebar and it will go into transmit mode, and it will stay in that mode until you push and release the spacebar again. Now, if you're like me and you hold down the spacebar, then your auto repeat will kick in on your spacebar and it will blip in and out of transmit mode continuously until you stop. Okay. So what I do is I set momentary, and then when I hold down the spacebar, it's like holding the PTT on my radio. When I let go of the spacebar, it's like letting go of the PTT on there. So that's the mode that I like, and I set it up that way. There is also an option here for serial port. You might have a foot pedal connected to your radio or connected to your computer, where you step on the foot pedal to transmit and let go to receive. It actually supports that functionality as well. Most people don't worry about that kind of thing. All right. Let's talk a little bit about EchoLink for Android. Jeff, do you want to take over at this point, or do you want me to keep going for a bit? I'll let you take over because you probably used it more than I have. So you're going to want to be in front of the machine so that the Zoom people can hear you and the recording.
Thanks. This is probably a little bit easier than setting it up on your computer. But like Jan mentioned before, it's probably a good thing to set it up before you need to use it. If you try and set it up at 7:30 on Sunday, you're not going to get validated in time. and it just takes away the stress. So this is great. This is the EchoLink. This is the app in the App Store for Android. That's what it'll look like when you find it. And once you install it, then and open it up, it's going to come up with this page that just asks you for your call sign, password, and email address. If you haven't logged into EchoLink before, just make up a password that you will use, and that will probably recognize you as a new user and take you through the validation part. I haven't been that way with, I was already validated before I set up my Android system, so I don't really know how that will work. First time you open it up, it's going to ask you to grant permission to find and determine the relative position of nearby devices. Go ahead and allow that. Once you've done that, the app will open up, and there will be a banner at the top of the screen that has these options on it. It'll say it's ready for QSO. There's going to be a refresh icon here, a search icon, little menu icon that gives you access to settings, help, and the privacy policy, and then tabs below for vocal conversations, texting, because you can text with the other people that are connected to the EchoLink node that you're talking to. This is the list of servers that you can connect to, and the star is for favorites. So the settings menu has a bunch of additional configuration options, and you can delve into those as interest and circumstances require. The one that Jan mentioned earlier that is this, where is it? Audio stream right here. That I currently have it set for voice call. The other option on my phone is music. So voice call probably gives you a little bit better, a little bit more understandable sound on the radio. Once you've done that, I think it's a good idea to try connecting to the Echo Test server. And you do that just by clicking on Echo Test in this window. It opens up a window that asks you if you want to connect. You can also click on the little heart button to make it one of your favorites. When you've connected, it's going to bring up this screen, and it will read that text to you. So you will get an audible sound when you connect to the Echo Test server, and it's just going to allow you to talk to the Echo Test server, and when you release the PTT button, it's going to echo that back to you. So you can get an idea of what it sounds like. So the transmit button is right here on the bottom of the screen. When you press that, it's going to, going to bring up this screen, and you can begin talking. When you want to finish talking, just to release the PTT, just touch anywhere on the screen, and it will let it go. Then you'll go back to this screen. It will play back the message that you said. You can repeat that as long as you want to hear your own voice. And when you might notice the little RX button down here, that will light up whenever you're receiving audio. And the end button is what you use to terminate your connection to the server. Once you've done that, you may want to connect to, when you want to connect to our club server, it's KL7KVGR. That's my call sign with the -R on the end. And the reason for that is that, well, we'd like it at some point to be N7MRY, but that requires validation of the club's license, the club call sign license, and we'll need to work with Dan to get that done. Yeah, we are. So you can tap the conversation bubble to begin texting, and the texting window looks like this. The messages will be visible to everyone connected to the node. And then you can switch back to the microphone tab by clicking the microphone button here, and that's where you will continue to have voice conversations. You can still hear what's going on when you're in this texting tab. You just don't have a push to talk button there. But go back and push the mic button in order to talk again or to end the connection. So I wanted to tell you a little history about why I decided to take this on as a project. The day I took my license, one of the examiners was a member of our club. And as luck would have it, the computers were being slow. And so we were kind of shooting the breeze while he waited for the computer to get back to him. And he asked me if I'd ever heard of EchoLink. And I remembered reading about it in the manual when I was studying. But he told me that that every Saturday he used EchoLink to join a net in Australia, where he was the net control operator for that net. And that was really intriguing to me. So later I traveled out of town, and I'd already been elected secretary. I felt like it was my job to monitor the net on Sunday night and everything. And I thought, how am I going to do that when I'm out of town? I arranged with someone else to fill in for me, of course, but it started me thinking about, is there a way that I can do that when I'm out of town? And I'd used WebSDR to listen in, but that didn't give me the opportunity to do the PTT and transmit. So I remembered the conversation I had with the guy about EchoLink and decided, and I thought maybe that's something I could set up. So I had a bunch of misconceptions. I thought EchoLink might be like the WebSDR, where I'd be able to take control of a remote radio and change the frequency and all of that. I thought I could start from scratch and set everything up really quickly. So, I started Thursday night before I was going out of town Friday, and of course that didn't happen. And then I thought that, it was just going to be my own connection to my radio transmitting to wherever. But that's not the way it's set up to work. Instead, it's kind of a nailed down connection, and you advertise on the EchoLink site when you connect to an EchoLink node. When you look at an EchoLink node and ask for information, it tells you what frequency it's on and what part of the country it's at and all of that kind of thing. The EchoLink documentation strongly encouraged me to get the permission of the station trustee before connecting it to an EchoLink or before making an EchoLink repeater node. So I talked with Dan and Jan about it, and they supported it. They were even encouraging. So I went back home and I switched my EchoLink node name to KL7KVG-R, and it immediately popped up with a validation screen. I thought, what is this about? I've already validated. But it just made me sign on again to verify that I was who I was. And then there are, as Jan mentioned, a bunch of SysOp options to change the configurations and the network configuration that Jan mentioned previously that I needed to do to get things to work. So here's my EchoLink node sitting out on my dining room table. This little box is a personal computer I bought for hobby use. It runs Windows 11. It's, oh. Yeah, that's laser. All right. So this little box here is the computer. It's a Windows 11 computer. It runs on 12 volts, takes 2 amps. It's not a very high-powered computer, but adequate for doing a lot of things. I can run it off a battery, and so what is the word? I recruited it for this purpose. And then this is my little DigiLink box. I had a SignalLink box that I could have used, but I didn't have a cable that would work with any of my radios. So I thought about what would be the best option for me, and the DigiLink provides a single USB connection to your computer, and it will both do the SignalLink's job and also provide you with cat control. So I thought that that would be kind of a fun thing to have for use with some of my other radios. And then I intended to use this with a mobile 220 transceiver I had, but I didn't read the documentation well enough and picked a cable with the wrong pin out. So when it came and I tried to have my first conversations with Jan, nothing worked. Fortunately, I'd ordered a cable for the HT and set it up with my little TYT TH350 that I bought when I first joined the club, and it was recommended. So, yeah. Okay, this is this is my flying saucer counterpoise that is really a heavy, I don't know what it is. It's it was in the baking aisle at Deseret Industries, and it's a heavy metal pan. I was using a cookie sheet, but then Ragnar told me that he had better success with a round pizza pan. So I followed Ragnar's advice and got the pizza pan. This is a mag mount antenna base, and I have a tri-band antenna attached to the mag mount. So the full setup here. Yeah. And the PC is remote controllable. I have software loaded so that I don't have to have a keyboard and monitor attached. I can use my iPad to talk to it and see the screen and work the keyboard and stuff like that. So it's a nice little setup. At least it works for me. So I wanted to share with you some of the configuration options from setting this up, partly because I'm such a novice. I will have had my license for 1 year on March 1st. And I know nothing. So maybe you old men who are more familiar with things will have some better ideas of how to configure this. One of the first things is now I've got the DigiRig that's acting as the sound card. So I set that up as the input and output device, and it opens the SysOp option, opens up the local mic and the monitor out so that I can configure things. The little PC doesn't have a microphone, so it's set at none when I took this picture. I've got it hooked up to a headset now, so there is a microphone now, and the speaker is the speaker that I want to listen to when I'm sitting in front of the computer. Then over here, the software needs to know when the radio is receiving a signal, so that it can pass that on the internet to whatever client is receiving it. And my radio doesn't have an electronic way of indicating when it's receiving a signal. So I'm operating it in Vox mode. It listens to the signal, and when the volume gets up above a certain point, then it starts transmitting that over the internet to whatever clients are listening. And some of these parameters are it waits 500 milliseconds. It's adjustable, but it waits 500 milliseconds from the time it sees a higher voice level or a higher sound level before it starts sending it down the line. There's an anti-thump, and after the signal goes quiet, it still stays listening for a second and a half before it stops transmitting over the internet. The DigiLink box, even if you don't have cat control, it is able to use the RTS line of the serial port to key the PTT button on the handset. So I've got the RTS. RTS is a handshaking signal that was used in RS-232 serial communication in the past, and still is for some applications. But in this case, we're using that RTS line to key the PTT on the transmitter. Then this is my HT is broadcasting, is transmitting, sorry, not broadcasting, transmitting. So it has to ID itself. I mean, the FCC requires it to ID itself. So this is where we set up that ID. And I listened to our repeaters ID, Morse code ID, and then I set this at different rates, and when it sounded like it was about the same rate as our repeater was doing, I left it there, and that was about 18 words per minute. The pitch is the default that it was set at, and the level got some feedback early on that it was way too loud, so I lowered it down. I don't know if it's still low enough, but we'll tweak that as we need to. We've currently got it set up to ID while active every 6 minutes. It might be more consistent with the FCC regs if we did it at the end of transmission every 10 minutes. Yeah. The voice of experience. Yeah, and that's what this checkbox is for here. It will wait for people to stop talking before it IDs itself. Correct. Then here's the options page, and it gives us options to make announcements. We've got it set to announce when a connection is made. So if I connect from my phone to the EchoLink box, as soon as I connect to the EchoLink box, it's going to hit the PTT and say KL7 KVG just connected. And when I disconnect, it will do the same thing. That's maybe not really necessary. We don't really have to. FCC doesn't require us to ID when we're listening, when we're just listening. Yeah. But you don't know if anyone else is. Yeah, you wouldn't know if someone's listening to it on a radio, on a HD, so. Just some things to consider. And this is the information about our repeater that is visible to the people who look us up and click the info button and stuff. Jan helped me put this together. I didn't know any of the information on it, so he basically told me what to type in, and I did it. Yeah. Well, some of the challenges that we had setting up this EchoLink node were my inexperience. But it's been a good learning exercise. The initial hardware incompatibility that I talked about, and testing this thing has been just interesting. The first time we tested, I had one radio, and that was the one that we were using for our EchoLink communications. So Jan would. And some poor people who were listening to the repeater and heard that nonsense going on tried to they tried to help us, and I couldn't talk to them because I didn't have a way. Right. Oh, I don't. Jan finally got on the air and apologized to whoever was. And then trying to work in the same room, sitting in front of the computer while it was making noise. Every time I keyed up the PTT, I'd start getting a squeal of feedback, and it was kind of crazy. So, and I even thought one time, I'm going to plug the HT at lowest power into a dummy load, and it still keyed up the repeater. Much to the confusion of someone else that was listening at that time. And then I got the bright idea. I remembered that there was an EchoLink client for the phone. So I loaded the EchoLink client for the phone, I configured it, and then I tried to talk to my node. But we were both on the same network, so it couldn't ever find my node. So yeah, I disconnected my Wi-Fi access so that I was going through Verizon for my Wi-Fi, and then I was able to connect to the node. So some of the lessons that I learned from this experience was it probably would have been better for me to get some experience as a user before I tried to set up a sysop node. I would have. I was fighting the learning curve, the whole EchoLink learning curve, instead of just the additional stuff to set up the sysop node. It likely would have been good for us to find a quiet simplex frequency and do our initial experimentation that way, instead of on a repeater where so many other people might have been listening. And I learned that it's good to have people, other eyes watching, other ears listening, other voices talking. It was really helpful to have Jan and at one point Sam helping us, plus the others that just happened to be listening at the time. We're almost through with this stuff. The limitations of the current setup are that it's a prototype. I only turn it on every now and again. I guess I'll start turning it on before our Sunday nets, and maybe I'll turn it on an hour before the Sunday net and leave it on for an hour after we're done, or something like that, if people want to use it and try it out and stuff. We've only tested it for inbound connections. On your phone, you can reach out to other nodes and stuff. That should be possible using a radio going through the repeater and using the DTMF codes to give the EchoLink node some commands to reach out to other repeaters. So you could use your HT connected to your HT talking on the repeater and connect to somebody in New York or whatever, using the touchtone stuff. But we haven't tested that. We haven't resolved any conflicts there might be with the repeater and other things. So we've already talked about the configuration choices and changing the call sign, and probably the most serious limitation of the setup, and this is true of all EchoLink, it depends on internet connectivity. So if there were an emergency that brought down the internet, it wouldn't do us any good. It's mostly useful for us to communicate when everything's working, and for those out of town or out of area kinds of communications that we talked about. So for the future, we need to learn to monitor and control the node remotely so that we can set it up as an always on thing at some location, some fixed location. Allow the DTMF control, continue to refine the configuration settings, rename the node, move to dedicated hardware, and maybe we can set this up in the EOC, but that would require some help from the city because of those configuration challenges. But yeah. So I'm finished with my talking. That's probably a good thing. I have the EchoLink node set up over here. You're welcome to go over and look at it. We wanted to do some kind of a demo here.
Yeah, so I'll shut down the presentation. And then I will bring up EchoLink software. Maybe. Okay. Maybe. All right. So this is what the EchoLink application looks like. And what you can see here, there's almost see it. So there's a bunch of menu options. These are like control buttons across here. This is just a connection. So the first thing it does when it starts up is it connects to the EchoLink servers, and then it will bring this up and give you a list of all of the EchoLink nodes that are out there. And so EchoLink supports this concept of conferences, which are like, think of that like a virtual repeater. So if I connected to one of these, I could talk to other people who are also connected to this conference. Okay. In IRLP land, they call that a reflector. In EchoLink, they call it a conference. I can look at links, which are, think of those as a node that's connected to a simplex radio somewhere. So on a simplex frequency. I can look at repeaters. And again, these are nodes that are connected to an actual repeater. And you'll see some of these are in blue. That means that it's busy. It's actually in use right now. Someone's talking on that. This one here also. These ones that are in black are idle. Okay? They're on, but they're idle. If we scroll this list down, and you can see these call signs are all over the world, right? Let's go down to KL7. HIJK, KL. There is. Yeah, there is one. There he is, right there, right there. KL7 KBG, you can see that's Murray, Utah, and it's on, and it says it's 8 o'clock there, which it is. And then you can see the node number 210076 is the node number. Does someone already have EchoLink on their phone or something like that and want to try connecting to it?
I'm currently on it.
I'm going to go ahead and click this. The other thing, so you can have your favorites, and I do have, you can mark it as a favorite. I do have that node here in my favorites. So I could just go there and when I double click it, now you can see I'm connected. The way we have it set up, I think, how many nodes can be connected at once? 20? Did we set it for 20?
Yeah.
So up to 20 nodes can connect to this node at the same time. All right. So again, remember I set it up so that the space bar is my PTT. So if I press the space, you see where it says RX down on the bottom, showing that it's receiving. If I press the space bar, it should go into transmit mode. Hello, hello. You hear me over there on the node? Somebody have a radio that can listen to the repeater? Does yours do 220? We may get some feedback if we do this, so be ready for some squealing. All right, I'm gonna try again. This is a test. 87 ZWV. We do need to tweak some settings for sure. Did you hear me on the radio, Sherwood? So Sherwood heard me on the radio. Go ahead and key up your radio and say something. I didn't hear it. Say it. There you go. Little bit of delay, right? It's got to go from his radio to the repeater. The repeater comes back to that radio. That goes into the computer, which then goes over the internet to my computer and then shows up on the speaker out here. So pretty slick, pretty awesome. Well, it actually works. And you can see over here who's actually connected to the node right now. So I see Ragnar, I see Gabriel, I see me, and somebody called Google Pixel 6 user. And then the Note itself, right? So pretty slick. It actually works. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. And that's up here on this top bar. I hit that. Now I have disconnected from the other. You hear the repeater just announced, or the node just announced on the repeater that I disconnected, and then sounded like it ID'd as well. You disconnected as well. Okay. So that's it. That's what we got. So if you want to fiddle with it, try it out, get validated, get yourself signed up for EchoLink, get validated, get the app installed on your phone or on your computer, wherever you want to use it. And yeah, we're going to spin it up for the net this Sunday. We'll probably, as Jeff said, we'll start it up about an hour before the net. The net's at 8 o'clock, so we'll spin it up about 7 o'clock. If you want to hop on and try it out, some people will be around, most likely, to chat. Then we'll do the net, and then we'll leave it up for a little while after the net, so people can play with it. But for an initial shot at things, I think it's actually working pretty good for now. Obviously, we need to tweak some settings. We need to tweak some things so that we make sure that we're not sending our repeater's ID string or anything like that over the air. I didn't hear that, so maybe that's already working. But there are some things that we'll want to tweak and play with. We'll want to set up the DTMF ability so that you can control it from your radio, so that you can tell the node, hey, connect to another node or connect to another conference from your radio, and then you'll be able to communicate through that mechanism. But overall, seems to work pretty cool, pretty slick. All right. That's all I got. I'm going to kill the recording as soon as I find where that button is. And definitely reach out to us if you have questions or problems with getting it to work. If you need some hand holding while you go through the process of signing up or any of that, let us know. We're happy to work with you and get everybody set up on that. But it should be pretty cool when we get this all working the way we want it.
How much was the hardware, the Windows terminal and the sound card that you have? I got a big deal on the radio on one of the Amazon days. About $200 for the little computer, and the digital was about $50. It's the digital is based on open source hardware, so the schematics and everything are available. The cables, the guy that has the digital business publishes the pinouts of the cable on his website. So
you can make your own cables. You can buy cables from him. They're anywhere from $20 to $30 for a set of cables. And he accommodates a lot of radios. And there are third-party sources too. I tend to get the cable and help me find custom made cables provisionally, and I actually make the for my mobile.
Sounds good. We'll see what it does. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. So thanks to everybody on the Zoom, and I'll get this up on the website either later tonight or tomorrow sometime.